Hi, this is Bradley Barth with SC Media here at InfoSecWorld in Orlando, Florida. I'm here with Niko Papez. He is the Senior Manager of Cybersecurity Strategy at Menlo Security. Today we're going to be talking about heat attacks, that is highly evasive adaptive threats. Niko will be leading a presentation on the subject matter today. Thanks so much for joining us, Niko, and I think a good place to start is really giving us a little bit of a definition of what is a heat attack and what does it constitute?
Yeah, so HEAT stands for Highly Evasive Adaptive Threats. It's essentially a class of cyber threats today that employ various techniques that are designed to evade our existing layers of security, our traditional detection-based technologies, to consequently evade these different types of technologies we have in place, ultimately delivering things like ransomware here today that we see all over the news.
So, give me a sense as to what are some of the factors that have contributed to a sudden proliferation of these heat attacks. I know you'll be making the case that this is becoming more commonplace, and there has to be a reason why attackers are suddenly trying to change their tactics a little bit. And in this case, I know with heat attacks, one of the central tenets of this particular malicious strategy is really focusing on the browser. So why is the browser all of a sudden the ideal point of attack?
It's a great question, Bradley. So if you think about, it's a bold question. I guess there's a loaded question, a lot in there. But, if you think about everything that's happening today with these hybrid environments, this increase in remote workforce today, it really comes down to a world where everything's in the browser, right? I mean, our applications are found there, our data is moving there, SaaS adoption is increasing, and so, in addition to that, the amount of trust that we have to place on our data today, where it's located and the people that have access to it, all this is increasing, and so it's become a very opportunistic playing field for these adversaries, right? In fact, all this online exposure, these web browsers, this has created this has greatly increased the attack surface, and the amount of data that we had that we have to be protected has exponentially multiplied over the last several years, and so it's just greatly expanded that attack surface for adversaries to go after today, leveraging things like these highly evasive adaptive threats. So,
in some cases, some of these tactics that the attackers are employing, they're not all necessarily brand new, but it is the use of these various tactics in combination with each other, is my understanding, again, with that focus on the browser. So what are some of the tactics, and explain also how these tactics are able to evade certain traditional defenses that organizations would normally employ, and why, and like what kinds of normal preventative measures may not stand up to a heat attack.
Yeah, definitely happy to answer that. So if you think about, why the prevalence, why this huge increase of these evasive techniques today, things like heat attacks, it's really because, attackers are not just using them individually, these traditional attacks like, leveraging a password protected archive file that just needs to be decrypted, or using an oversized file to evade, the file size limit of existing sandboxes. But they're using these old techniques coupled with new techniques in combination together to really bypass those existing security tools. And with just heat attacks alone, our Menlo Labs threat team has after analyzing over nearly about 500,000 malicious URLs, they've noticed about 69% of attacks today are leveraging these heat attacks, or these highly evasive adaptive threats. And some of these characteristics that are used are things like evading file content inspection, a more elegant way outside of those password protected archive files and things like oversized files is using a technique known as HTML smuggling, where we're essentially embedding tiny bits of malicious code into these seemingly benign JavaScript blobs, or these little subcomponents. And to the sandbox, these tiny subcomponents, they're not in any format that's understandable by the sandbox, nor are they active or malicious in any means. But when they get to the endpoint, they dynamically rebuild themselves into this malicious executable without any user interaction. So it's a very effective way of bypassing those security tools completely. Our traditional proxies, our firewalls that can't stop this. And then, there's other heat characteristics that exemplify things like evading the malicious link analysis along the email path. To your point, right? I mean, phishing has always been around, but it's always normally been 100% an email problem. So attackers today are finding, alternative paths that are unprotected or unsecure outside of that traditional email path. Things like our collaboration tools like Slack. They're looking at other alternatives like professional networks. They're leveraging, faked job offers through LinkedIn by spear phishing victims, delivering a potential fake job offer, a resume, and they're using that to host malware and deliver that to the endpoints. We've also seen ways of trying to evade web categorizations by these threat actors. They're compromising poorly protected websites. They're using them to flip the behavior of that website, host malware, drive people to that, and infect them all before these offline categorization engines have had a chance to actually catch them or deem them as malicious or a bad category at that point. And so, we've even seen bad actors or these threat actors, go even as far as patiently creating new websites, leaving them to gain a good reputation. That may be even, several weeks or months, and doing that exact same thing, flipping the behavior, hosting that malware, serving it to those endpoints, all before these categorization engines can catch these as doing something malicious or some type of nefarious activity. And then lastly, another key example we've seen is through the use of obfuscated JavaScript. We've seen adversaries use things like obfuscated JavaScript or website manipulations to bypass these web page inspection tools. So all these different characteristics used individually or in combination have really become a way for adversaries to leverage those web browser vulnerabilities and those web browser features today to infect those endpoints and the users.
That leads to the question, what can be done about it? And are there certain policies that companies can develop around SaaS application usage or cloud usage or other types of safeguards or browser-based security methods that can specifically be implemented to root out heat-based attacks?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, today to really combat a lot of these evasive threats that we're seeing out there, this sophisticated type of malware, these ransomware attacks, everyone says they can solve that ransomware problem, right, or solve this challenge with using zero trust strategies or SASE type frameworks. Why all these are secure believed to be important. I completely support the idea of, how do we follow the right strategy in place? How do we look to, the SASE framework where we're delivering still secure access, but ensuring or enforcing those policies around security, and then zero trust, how do we trust no one and verify everything? I think those are important, but what a lot of companies are still doing is they're still relying on that those detection capabilities, those detection technologies. And so what we really need to start doing is shifting our mindset from one of detection to one of prevention, right? How do we prevent that initial access? Because if we can stop it, if we can prevent that initial malware incursion from hitting those endpoints, then we can prevent everything else that follows, right? The account compromise, the lateral movement, the data exfiltration. We can prevent all those additional steps. And I'm not saying to, replace anything. I fully support a defense in depth strategy. I mean, we still want to maintain our backup and recovery solutions. We still want those detection capabilities. But what we want to start looking at is how do we couple those existing technology capabilities with things like prevention, with things like isolation or advanced anti-phishing solutions today. And I think that's where we'll start to see the biggest effect of, despite all these investments that we're making year after year, we're still seeing breaches happen. And so if we start to shift our mindset and invest in the right solutions at the right point of access where we're seeing these adversaries breach those endpoints, we'll truly start to see some success and start moving forward in the right way.
But are there things that organizations can do to detect some of these heat-based attacks in the first place, so they can get a jump on any such type of malicious activity?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one way to really validate your level of protection against these heat attacks that I'm talking about is through a website we actually created called Heat Check. Now, Heat Check is designed to provide these several real-world examples of these heat attacks that I'm talking about. We're not looking to infect anyone. It's not actual malware, but what we're trying to do is, show you the implementation of these various techniques and really see if your security controls in place, things like your proxies, your firewalls, are able to detect these types of files. And so, we invite everyone to partake. We can help educate you more on some of these various heat attacks, and then you can assess your resilience against these various heat attacks. And at the end of the day, it's going to help you improve your overall security controls and how to prevent against these types of evasive threats.
All right. Well, thanks, Niko. I appreciate the time and the thoughts and perspective. A very appropriate topic, heat attacks here in the sweltering heat of Florida. Glad we could talk about that today. That's Niko Papez from Menlo Security. I'm Bradley Barth from SC Media. And until next time, have a safe day online.